Hello again. It's been a long time since I posted a video. Paul came home from the hospital on June 3rd and today it's June 19th, so it's been quite a while. It was a bit of an adjustment and I was exhausted leading up to it because I had spent so much time getting the house ready. We had a lot done. We had the vents cleaned, the whole house cleaned, walls, windows, upholstery, carpeting, everything was cleaned. We also replaced a small bit of indoor-outdoor carpeting on our back porch, which was really disgusting. The carpeting was just very old and worn, and I wanted it to be nice and fresh and clean. So then Leo, we had a little problem with Leo. He had gotten injured about a week before Paul was supposed to come home, and he was supposed to have gone to his board and train program in downtown Chicago, and he was supposed to go there before all the cleaning started. So it was really difficult because he's a very energetic and rambunctious dog, and I had to confine him pretty much to the kitchen, the basement, and the backyard. And when the cleaners were here, we were outside, and it was the hottest day ever. Humid, awful. And he was looking a little stressed, so I had to bring him in the basement and force him to rest in his crate in the cool basement. Anyway, now Leo is down where he's going to stay for a few weeks until Paul is a little more strong, and we're waiting for Paul's blood counts to be more appropriate because he has to be able to fight infection. You can have a pet in the house when you have a transplant patient, but the animal has to stay away from the patient and, obviously not cleaning up poop or anything like that. And Leo is so energetic and rambunctious and wants to be with everyone, and we thought it would just be easier to have him go, get a little bit of training, and come back, hopefully a calm and sedate dog. And by then, Paul's immune system should have built up enough from the stem cell transplant to support having an animal in the house. We still have our cat, but our cat is very quiet and well behaved, and he stays in Kristen's room in the basement for the most of the day and comes up in the evening after Paul is already in bed, and then he stays with me. So we're all set there. So the house is really nice. It's clean, it's organized. I think I may have mentioned in a previous video that my son and his fiance, and then later my daughter, they came over 2 separate days and we cleaned out the basement, and that really helped with organizing stuff. So that's kind of what happened before. And then I went to pick up Paul, and when I brought him home, I was really shocked at how tired he was. See, prior to that, I had gone and stayed with him for a week, and I went to the hospital on day 0, which was the day they infused the stem cells, because I wanted to be there. I felt it was a momentous occasion. And I stayed there a week, and he was beginning to feel the effects of the massive chemotherapy that they gave him prior to giving him the stem cells. And this chemotherapy is crazy strong. It's awful, and what it's intended to do is to wipe out any remaining cancer cells and also to pretty much destroy the person's bone marrow. And without your bone marrow stem cells, you can't produce any red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, etc. But then you put in the new stem cells from the donor, and the hope and prayer is that the new stem cells will engraft, which just means that they, hang out there and start producing blood cells for the patient. So lucky for us, Paul's stem cells seem to be working. His sister was his donor. They were 100% match, and his blood counts are rising, indicating that it is working. And so far he hasn't had any graft versus host disease, or GVHD, which is a common complication. So we're on the lookout for that. So getting back to when he came home from the hospital, I had been talking with him several times a day via FaceTime before he came home. So I got there and he seemed pretty energetic. He was packing up his stuff. And then we got all the discharge instructions and came home. But then he kind of collapsed. He just went to bed and was so tired. And what I didn't realize, what he didn't tell me, is that we would FaceTime when he felt his best. So I thought he was just kind of tired but recovering. What I didn't know is that most of the time after I had left the hospital, when that massive chemo really kicked in, that he was wiped out. So that was a bit of a shock. But the good news is that each day there's a little tiny improvement in his energy level. It is so slow because it's been 16 days since he came home and he's still just as tired as can be. But I do see a difference. But it's just the longest time, to improve. But that's what the doctors tell us they expect. So we'll just go with that. As far as how I've been, I've had good days and bad days. And at first, I was having a lot of bad days. I'm not really sure what it was. It could have been all the stress for everything that we had done prior to Paul coming home. That was a lot to organize. And I didn't mention, on top of it, we also had one room painted as well. It was looking kind of dismal and cracked and awful. And I thought it would be a nice surprise. Probably not the best thing to do in retrospect, but it's done, it's nice. Anyway, all those home improvements caused a tremendous amount of stress. And then on top of it, I, of course, was concerned about Paul. Is his recovery going well, etc. Having to deal with all the home improvements and trying to rein in Leo, and it was hot, and I don't do well in the heat. That made for a really tough time getting ready for Paul's homecoming. So then he finally came home, and I'm doing home infusions. He still has his central line, and I have to give him an infusion every day, and then flush the other 2 ports. And this is fine because I'm a nurse, and they taught me how to do it. It wasn't a big deal. It's just like babies, only larger. But I did have some issues just feeling not myself and in a weird place. I've been feeling this before because when you have a loved one with cancer, you are in a weird place. And then the COVID on top of it, the isolation and weirdness all around that, that was concerning. And then we also had a very practical concern for our safety because all the riots started happening, and they were rioting near the hospital where Paul goes for his aftercare. So I was very freaked out about that, and that caused me a lot of anxiety, and I didn't realize it, that each time we would go down to the hospital for an outpatient visit, I would be like really scared and tense, and as we got closer, I'd be looking around. One day we saw lots of police cars, and it just made me very nervous, and so those were not good days. Things are sort of calming down in that regard, I think. And we are able to do a lot of the visits now with a telehealth. It's sort of like Zoom, but medical. And so it's saving us a trip going down there, which is really good. So I had my bad days, and then I noticed last week, all of a sudden, I don't know what it was. I just felt okay. I don't know if it was I just accepted this new reality, or that I felt more comfortable with doing the home care, or just that Paul was doing well. And maybe that's the big thing, that, it was obvious his stem cell transplant is working. And I think maybe that has helped me feel more equilibrium. And I've also been trying to do a little bit of stuff for myself. I've been doing some stuff with music. I've mostly been transcribing music onto my Finale program, which is a music notation program. I've also played my harp, and I've been exercising, and that's really key. I think the exercising is very important because I wasn't doing much of that. and that really does help me feel better. It's also nicer weather out, and Paul actually went for a walk 2 days. There were 2 days we went for a walk just around the block. That was all he could handle. He was moving very slow, which I expected that. And he did okay, and I think it was good for him. And Paul just really enjoys being outside, so that's really good. We've also sat outside a lot. He will sit in the garden. Transplant patients have to be very careful not to get sunburned or too much sun exposure. So Paul has this SPF hat that he wears, and he sits with his back to the sun so that he feels the warmth of the sun, but it's not directly on his skin. So he's really enjoying that. We did hire gardeners this year because there's no way Paul can take care of the garden in his state, and I'm doing a lot of other things, so we did hire them out, and they've made it look really nice, and they planted some flowers for us, which I have to get out there and water. So that's really nice, and that's a really wonderful thing because Paul loves to be out in the warmth. He loves a hot baking day, which I can't stand, but he loves it. And he gets chilled so easily because his hemoglobin is still not up to snuff, although it is improving. We are seeing the highest levels of his hemoglobin since December. Last December, there was one point when he had a hemoglobin of 9. Now, know that the normal is supposed to be 14-ish, 15-ish, and he's never been above 9 since. But we got his lab work back from yesterday. The traveling phlebotomist came by and drew his labs, and he was 9.8, which is a miracle. So I'm doing more. I feel less confined, even though we are self-isolating. It's a state of mind, really. I feel freer and more like myself, and that I can go and do things while Paul is resting and not feel like I have to be on watch all the time, although I am, and just kind of trying to get back to the things I like to do. And I'm looking forward to the future. Paul is on day 37 since his transplant. We're looking to day 100 because it's the first 100 days that are the most critical. So he's over a third of the way there. And I'm just kind of looking ahead now to us being back to normal, him feeling better. He plans to work from home when he is feeling better and more recovered. And then perhaps I can then go out in the world again if the world ever opens up. I live in Illinois. We're going to be locked down forever. Anyway, I hope that things start opening up so that in September I can maybe start to do the things that I enjoy, like ballet class, harp lessons, Bible study, all that good stuff. All the good stuff I was enjoying last fall before Paul got sick. This has been a really strange, awful, disheartening journey, but thankfully we have hope, and I'm just so grateful for that. Well, thanks for watching.